was this investigation by Reuters on Amazon. This is intense. I wanted to share this with everyone. If you have not read this, hop over to Reuters and read it. Amazon wages secret war on Americans' privacy, documents show. This is an investigative piece by Reuters. Amazon Inc. has amassed a vast amount of sensitive personal information on its customers. Internal documents reveal how a former aide to Joe Biden helped the tech giant build a lobbying juggernaut that has gutted legislation in over 24 states seeking to give consumers more control over their data. In recent years, they have undermined privacy protections in more than 36 bills across 25 states as the e-commerce giant amassed a lucrative trove of personal data. In Virginia, the company boosted political donations tenfold over 4 years before persuading lawmakers this year to pass an industry-friendly privacy bill that Amazon itself drafted. How is it in this country that one of the largest corporations in the country can just write legislation? What sort of system is this, bro?
They write the legislation that regulates them. Yeah, it's
That's who we want writing our privacy legislation, Amazon, right? Give me a break, dude. And all these politicians talk tough about Bezos, too. That's what drives me crazy. All these guys, Hawley and all these type of people talking how they're going to lay the smackdown on these big tech companies, and then this is what's happening behind the scenes. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, those are just easy talking points. You can get easy political gain by just saying his name and saying we're going to go after him. But I think the whole privacy thing, I would hope it should be one of the next big political issues that we end up dealing with. I mean, it's a weird one because it is something that's ours, my information, my data, and it's being taken from me without my knowledge in many cases, and certainly not with my consent or, obviously you're just clicking
Nominal
okay
consent
at the end of a weird document. But yeah, it's being taken and it's being monetized by these different companies and sold around everywhere. And I don't know.
But hey, at least you can buy cheap Chinese shit really easily, I guess, and force your postal workers to deliver it. Great trade-off.
In the meantime, we have an algorithm that can determine what you're going to eat for supper.
What their algorithms are accused of doing is they track everything that's bought, and then whatever's selling well, they make their own version of. Like, they order their own line of that and then list it above the original.
Yeah.
Pretty scummy. The architect of this under-the-radar campaign to smother privacy protections has been Jay Carney, who previously served as communications director for Biden when he was vice president and as press secretary for President Barack Obama. He was hired by Amazon in 2015 and reported directly to Jeff Bezos. He built a lobbying and public policy juggernaut that has grown from 24 employees to 250, according to Amazon documents. Their own private lobbying organization just to lobby for privacy legislation. Unbelievable what they're doing to this country, dude.
Yeah, it's not splashy. It never grabs anybody's attention. I don't know. I would be surprised to ever hear about something like this even getting its own media cycle. Like the next 3 days, there's this bombshell report about all these recordings being made by Amazon that completely infringes on our right to privacy. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm getting at, but there's just something about it where it's not interesting to people. It doesn't really grab any attention.
Because it doesn't directly affect their lives in a way they can understand or see, basically.
It's like a couple layers. It's just so far removed from what I can tell on my day-to-day basis, or what seems flashy, or what seems pertinent to my day-to-day life.
People are busy, man.
Without us knowing one way or another, we just get better recommendations on our news feed, I guess.
Here's a quote with a couple interesting points. Okay, this is referencing one of their investigators requested all their data, which you can request all your data, and they sent it to them. And one of these guys found that Amazon had more than 90,000 recordings, Alexa devices made of the reporter's family members since 2017. In some, young children are heard asking questions about sexual anatomy, including, quote, Alexa, what is a vagina? My Alexa just turned on, dude. I'm going to unplug it real quick. Hold on. It's so creepy, dude. And you can tell when it's doing shit because it'll be spinning. It'll have like this yellow light and it'll be spinning. Like, what are you doing, Alexa? Very creepy. So just know, whatever you tell her, she's recording apparently, and is in some Amazon drive somewhere.
And it's not just Alexa. I mean, it's your phone. It's everything that has a microphone on. It's all doing the same crap. I believe like they're all listening to what you're saying. I mean, any sort of digital assistant, whatever Google is, OK Google, there's a Samsung specific one. I mean, they're all constantly listening to you, right?
If you turn them on, you have to allow access to your microphone.
Yeah.
I hope. I mean, who knows, dude? I'm sure there's some Cambridge Analytica type company buying all this data to run political campaigns.
Well, I don't know if it was you and I that were talking about it. There's, I don't know, it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. I read an article where if you're scrolling through your news feed, your camera is watching your eye movements. And if you linger, you don't even have to click on the article. If your eyes linger on the article longer than they lingered on the other, it takes that information into account and will,
I believe it.
We'll feed you more of that stuff. But I always thought, because I like to scroll through my news feed, like, well, if I click on one, then it's going to send me more of that. Mine's all pretty mundane stuff like archaeology, a lot of archaeology websites and, I don't know, random political stuff. But yeah, I don't know, that would be a good experiment, just to scroll through and just look at it. This one longer.
Well, it wouldn't have to use an eye tracker. It could just tell where you were focused on in the scrolling.
So here's what you do. You scroll it to where you can just barely see the headline at the bottom, but there's like 2 headlines above it that are taking up the majority of the. See, that's what I thought too. Like, oh well, it's whatever. It's stopping, or it's assuming you're reading whichever one is centered on the page. But this article was saying, that it actually is, or maybe that they're developing software that can actually track your eye movement and see which one you're specifically looking at. But it seems like that could be prime ground for an experiment.
Maybe that's something we can dig into more one day.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in nootropics, check out my website. We are still running free shipping through the fall. Time is almost up, though, guys. If you have been thinking about trying nootropics, try them now. Go to my website, MetamaxPerformance.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shire Hemp Farms, your #1 source for CBD and Delta 8 products, along with other ethnobotanicals, ginseng, yellow root. Come check us out. We've got great prices on all our products. We have a new podcast discount code. This is ESPODWIN. Winter. Winter's coming. Get your Delta 8. Stay home on a cold day and come check us out. ShireHempFarms.com.
Evil Unmasked.
That's too good.
This week we're going to cover Peter Thiel. I mentioned that we would get to him eventually. Let's talk about him this week. He's in the news for his massive campaign donations for the 2022 race. Here's an article by The Hill. Tech billionaire Peter Thiel is establishing a reputation as a financial powerhouse in GOP circles. He's spent $10 million so far in donations, supporting J.D. Vance's run in Ohio and Blake Masters in Arizona. He's also expected to write more checks, this article says. He is getting heavily involved in gubernatorial politics, specifically. I'll go through his background a little bit here real quickly. He was born in Frankfurt, Germany. He'd spent some time growing up in South Africa, as we've mentioned, and then he moved to the United States. He received a BA from Stanford and a doctorate in law from Stanford. And he was a law clerk for the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, after which he worked as a securities lawyer for Sullivan and Cromwell, a large international white shoe law firm. He was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Education. And he also did time as a derivatives trader at a Swiss bank. And in 1998, he co-founded PayPal and was on the board until it sold to eBay. And he founded Palantir in 2004, a big data firm. there was this. There are several components of Palantir, but the one I wanted to touch on was Palantir Gotham. This is a predictive policing system. It uses big data to determine when, where, and who will commit future crimes. It is used by police departments in the United States, such as the NYPD's Patronizer, it's called. It is also used by the Chinese Communist Party to identify potential Uyghur terrorists for assignments to re-education camps. And in 2004, Peter Thiel purchased 10% of Facebook before it exploded for $500,000. So, you know, when he talks big and tough about big tech, he's part of it. He's a big part of it between Palantir and Facebook.
You know what the Palantir are, don't you?
No.
Okay, so the Palantirs were from Lord of the Rings. And they were they're called the Palantir. There were several of them, but they were the all-seeing eyes that Saruman and Sauron had. The globe that they could look into and see everywhere and keep an eye on everything all at once from one location. So, I mean, certainly nothing ominous at all about Sauron being able to see everything and keep control of. Keep track of everything that's going on.
Predictive policing is pretty frightening. Yeah. Haven't there been movies made about that?
Oh yeah, for sure. And they never end well. Odd that works like that.
Was there a Van Damme movie like Future Cop or something like that? I don't remember what it was.
Unfortunately, probably.
He founded a couple of venture capital firms after that, investing in tech startups. He made a bunch of money off the tech bubble, and he has an estimated net worth currently of $6.92 billion. He's 410th on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. So the Teal Foundation is his investment group that he has. There are three main parts, I believe. The Teal Fellowship, which gives $100,000 grants to under 20-year-olds, like before they graduate college, and the idea is to give them this money so they drop out of school and start startups, basically. Mm-hmm. There is this other organization in the Teal Fellowship called Imitatio. This is a project that, quote, aims to understand the world through mimetic theory. I don't know what this is. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to really anybody. Some sort of weird philosophy branch. Not sure why he's interested in that, but it's ominous, quite ominous if you look into it. And Breakout Labs is an organization that gives grants to speculative research projects. So when people talk about Peter Thiel funding these research projects, this is what it is. It's Breakout Labs here. They have all these strange startups, these tech startups, basically. Positron dynamics to enhance the production and collection of positrons, a class of elementary particles. It's one of the more interesting sounding ones. Most of these sound kind of boring, but these are all centered around the medical industry, basically, and they're all trying to cash in on medical breakthroughs. Basically, is what it looks like to me. And people are speculating that he's trying to live forever here with this. With these investments, trying to invest in technologies that are going to lead to increased longevity for the human race, and probably him particularly is what he's interested in, I imagine.
Yeah, mostly him.
Other people too, but
other billionaires, yes.
Other rich people, yeah. There is the SENS Foundation, headed by Aubrey de Grey. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. Mm-hmm. This is also part of the Teal Fellowship. You can tell he's serious because of his beard.
Rather than trying to slow down those two arrows, the process where metabolism creates damage or the process where damage creates pathology, instead, we can separate the arrows from each other. We can go in and periodically repair the damage so that even though it's being created at the natural rate, nevertheless, it will not actually accumulate to the point where it's bad for you. And, of course, that's what we already do, coming back to my point that aging is a phenomenon of physics. It's what we already successfully do with simpler machines, with man-made machines. This car, of course, is more than 100 years old, and it was not designed to be that old. It was probably designed to last no more than 10 years or 15. But because it's had periodic preventative maintenance throughout its existence, it's doing just as well now as when it was built. So, if it's so simple, if it's so obvious, then why the hell do I have to come and give these bloody talks? I mean, honestly, the answer really is people are shit scared of getting their hopes up, of believing that after the entire history of civilization having failed to bring the world's most important problem under control, that finally we might be in striking distance of doing it. Nobody wants to get...
So basically he has built this... created this roadmap for how to increase longevity. And his idea is, his organization's idea that's funded by Peter Thiel, in large part, is to repair the body, attempting to repair the different aspects of damage as much as they're accumulated. So essentially, to stop the aging process. And he has identified all these different metrics that need to be done, and he is working on doing them.
I've actually listened to him on Rogan before. I guess, I don't know, this is all so beyond me, obviously, but is anyone else really picking up on this, like in the broader medical scientific community? Because, I don't know, I got the kind of feeling from him that he was a bit of a snake oil salesman himself, but...
Well, his whole contribution is the roadmap, right? The other people are the ones that are going to have to do all this stuff. Cell loss, cell atrophy, replace using stem cells, division-obsessed cells, so that's cancer, reinforce using telomere control. So some of these were probably really far out, right? Like telomere control for preventing cancer, yeah, that'd be great, but I'm sure people are working on it, but,
Yeah, the telomeres were the ones in particular, that's what I particularly remember him talking about. I guess it's a sequence of genetic coding at the end of somewhere attached to the cell that every time it's replicated, it gets shorter and shorter, and that's kind of a sign for aging. But I don't know. I feel like I could have come up with this roadmap myself. Like, aging, make it stop. All right, you guys figure this out.
Well, he breaks it down a little bit, but in terms of like actual research to get the stuff done, he sounds like he's convinced that they're working on it and they're getting closer. But
this might be a hustle funded by a billionaire to get other billionaires that want to live for forever to contribute to the research so that Peter Thiel can catch up to his boy Elon Musk and not be 400 something on the billionaire list.
I think you just explained capitalism, basically. Slightly rich people convincing even richer people to give them their money to do stuff. It'll help us all. And that's it for Aubrey de Grey. But we will also cover the Seasteading Institute again. We've talked about this before. This is headed by Patry Friedman, grandson of Milton Friedman.
Today, we have incredible potential as new technologies open up new possibilities. We could have open source societies drawn from a Wikipedia of rules and social structures. We could organize society as a...
This is 2012, by the way, which is why he is so optimistic about Facebook, apparently. He thinks Facebook is going to be the new government, essentially.
Direct democracy using social networks.
Direct democracy using social networks.
Choose to subscribe to a shiny, integrated citizen experience that we renew annually.
Subscription-based society.
But our societal environment blocks this potential. Let's consider the evolution of today's dominant species of society that we live in, representative democracy. That evolution took a bloody revolution and an open frontier where the new society could grow up far away from its parents, who were not so supportive. But we've run out of frontier.
If only you could elect your parents. Wouldn't that be something?
All land is claimed, and our revolutions have become increasingly superficial. We're changing individual leaders. We're no longer creating new societies. From a social sense, it's like we're back in the age of the dinosaurs. The
He's complaining about no more lands to conquer.
world is full of these
Interesting take.
big, blundering country creatures.
I
And there's
complain
no
about it too.
space, there's no place
No more
for
land to
new
steal.
evolutionary leaps to better ways for us to live together.
A good Thanksgiving message.
In some ways, this stability is wonderful. These are my children, and it's wonderful that they can grow up safe from violence, enjoying new technologies. But we could offer them so
Not growing up in the inner city, obviously.
much more, and I want to. I don't trust 18th century societal DNA to handle the problems of the 21st century. But what can we do? Well,
What can we
let's
do,
learn
Tony?
from this journey and return to where we began, the oceans. Join me for a moment in a thought experiment. Suppose that we could build here as cheaply as building here in San Francisco. Not that cheap, but doable. What would that enable? It would reopen the frontier so that pioneers with new notions for new nations could peacefully put them into practice. We could have evolution without revolution.
Sounds pretty good. What do you think?
I'm really fascinated with the idea. I like a lot of what he was talking about. I think the tools aren't there. You know, having a basically like a social network by which we could kind of organize or structure life. It's not that's truly democratic. I mean, Facebook is obviously it's not now because it's been corrupted. But let's say Facebook is what it was supposed to be, where it's you, me, everyone. We have our page, our voice to speak with, and we use that to communicate and to some extent figure out legislation and how we want to go about doing things.
Sure.
I don't think there's anything wrong inherently with it. Now, obviously, the same thing with seasteading. You know, different experiments and experiments in different forms of government. I think it's great. It's awesome. You know, there's always new things to be learned, new ways to go about doing things. I mean, the problem is, and I imagine we're going to get to, when you have, you know, kind of nefarious people with ulterior motives pushing these ideas. But I don't know. You want to get into seasteading a little bit more, or?
Well, I wanted to talk about the Facebook thing for a second.
Okay.
I think, yeah, Facebook was sort of like a new commons, right? It was a new common area for everybody to share and everybody to use, and it, you know, apparently they were just stealing our data and selling it to advertising companies the whole time. But and a lot of people got kicked off, and it wasn't just right wingers, of course. A lot of people got kicked off the common areas.
If Facebook actually was the idea of what Facebook was supposed to be, that would be a great thing, and I think that could potentially be an important tool for democracy and for, you know, grassroots organization.
Let's let everybody vote digitally. Sure, put an app. I mean, do what you got to do. Let everybody vote. But that's not what anybody wants to do.
Yeah, I mean,
they're building fucking seasteads to escape the government of the people. You know.
Yeah, and I've got no problem with that either. You know, as long as we have proper tax law and import and tariff duties.
You don't have any problem with like Peter Thiel taking his $6.92 billion and parking it in some seastead somewhere that he extracted from the labor of the workers of this country.
As long as we have proper import and tariff laws, if the money was made here, you have to pay proper taxes on it before you take it wherever you're going to take it to.
They don't have that in the United States anymore. It's neoliberalism, baby.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have it, but if it's not being used as a means, which that's what they're trying to do, obviously, to set up, you know, duty-free countries right offshore. Yeah, I don't know. I guess
What would you tax capital flight at if you had the golden hammer?
Okay. I don't know. I'm probably thinking, I don't know, somewhere around 40%.
40%. So he would keep
40%.
3-something billion of it, huh?
All right. How much money is he at?
$6.92 billion. $7 billion basically, of assets.
$6 billion.
Wealth.
Okay. So you take that money, it's in your bank account, you give us 2.5, walk away with your other 4.5, 5, whatever, and you're free and clear. good to go.
Yeah. I don't think you would do it without I think you would hire a private army to try to stop you, Tony.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. and this is also all assuming that he was, I don't know, this is kind of a whole other thing. The system's so screwed. This is assuming that the money was made ethically and that he wasn't exploiting workers and all that stuff, because that's a whole other thing. But yeah, the idea of seasteading that, as long as the money's taken out of the country at a number that people agree with, it's legitimately acceptable. Cool, go do it. That's the problem with these things is they're not really experiments in democracy. They're experiments in hiding money.
Right. I think if there was a referendum to say what tax we should put on it, then there would be one, right? But you just leave it up to the government we have, and they're not going to regulate that in any way because they're profiting off of it. Yeah. Well, believe it or not, this has been tried. We have had our first seasteaders. These famous, this famous couple, Chad and Nadia, the first seasteaders. I watched this whole series. This is fascinating. I think you'll enjoy this. And this is quite an experiment in democracy. It's everything you could dream it would be. They're creating a new world, a new frontier, living the life.
So Ocean Builders is selling this oceanfront property at a fraction of the cost any other place you would get oceanfront property. So it's the fact that we're beginning something completely brand new. It's going to grow bigger and bigger. So the whole seasteading concept will be better governance. Your business will grow because you're actually in a system where there's smart.
Your business will grow because you're actually in a smart system.
Smart systems as opposed to all the gridlock and...
okay, he's just kind of giving the whole game away right there.
They have a monopoly on land, but they don't have a monopoly on sea. The fact that it takes the FDA, 5 years to approve a new drug that could save millions of people's lives, we don't need that. And
he's got his stuff together, doesn't he? He's on it, man. He's new frontier. Who needs the FDA? Just give me any random drug. Who cares? We don't need regulation.
The fact it takes the FDA to 5 years to get drugs that are saving people's lives. That's what the 5 years is about. We have to
need
make sure it actually is saving people's lives and not making them grow extra arms, man.
What was it, thalidomide babies? Was that it? They were selling thalidomide unapproved, and it was causing terrible deformities in babies.
Oh, was that the chirality thing? I heard about this on the Radio Lab. And
I'm sure you have,
the chiral image version of it was causing all these horrible birth defects. But
it wasn't approved, but they were allowed to do it at the time, I guess, and they tightened restrictions after that, I think. I'm not sure exactly. But basically these guys, they did is they drove this boat out here in the ocean, and they raised it up on this platform, and they just it's just kind of stuck there now. I mean, there's a lot of points I wanted to make about this. This is really dumb. They're using a diesel generator. They don't have electricity, obviously. If they have cell service, they're using some country's cell service that they're not paying taxes for. They're shipping in all their food and water, obviously, from a country, again, who they're not paying taxes for none of this stuff. There's subsidies for all this food to make the food cheap, and they're not contributing. They're kind of just...
freeloaders.
And, what's the carbon footprint of this thing, basically, right? I mean, I'm sure maybe it would be better if you had a whole community of these. I have no idea what the ecosystem implications are of having a bunch of the ocean covered up with, houseboats. I don't know. And I also wanted to point out the fact that this was actually a movie. It was called Waterworld, and it didn't turn out so well for the humans. Living on boats isn't really that great,
Kevin Costner's greatest movie.
Anyway, it seems like a lovely romantic time here, doesn't it? How does the story end, though?
Family and friends of Chad Elwertowski fear his life is on the line. He and his girlfriend are now on the run after Thai police officials accuse them of essentially trying to lay claim to Thai territory with their floating house.
It all of a sudden changed to where he became a fugitive. It was almost like you're reading something out of a movie.
My greatest fear is that he's going to end up killed through all this.
They were just living there. They didn't build it. They didn't buy it. They were.
The Thai government claimed that he was trying to secede from Thailand, basically. He was off the coast of Thailand, like 25 nautical miles. And he's facing life in prison or a death sentence for this charge. So they are in hiding, like in Central America somewhere. They were making Facebook posts from Panama the last I checked. They haven't caught him. They did make it out of Thailand.
The Thai don't mess around with that stuff.
Apparently not.
You get caught with a joint, it's death sentence.
In closing here, Chad is a Bitcoin miner who believes that, if you read his Facebook posts and stuff, he's pretty crazy. He believes that he's not responsible for the unequal distribution of wealth in the world because wealth is handed down voluntarily, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's okay that he's a rich Bitcoin miner who can build houseboats off of Thailand's coast. I find that a little crazy, but okay.
You got to make up your excuses. Legitimize what you're doing.
So the whole the whole seasteading thing didn't go that well the first time, but that was just a trial run, So the next one will be better.
Fingers crossed.
Seasteading.org if you're interested, Tony. They'll sell you the houseboat thing and everything. They'll show you how to put it up.
Well, I don't need to do it on the sea. I'm not. I get motion sick real easy, so probably not for me.
I don't know if there's running water. I don't know. It's probably not the best place to live.
Probably not. Probably. I'm just going to secede where I live at. I'm a farm. I'm going to draft my articles of secession this week.
So some of the people Peter Thiel is connected to, he has invested in Josh Hawley, if you know who this is. He's a conservative politician. He's sort of he made the news this past week for this conference he did, or it was a couple weeks ago now, where he was going after the left's attack on masculinity and other sort of culture war stuff.
But I want to focus tonight on the deconstruction of men.
Oh, this is the
because I think
the guy's been very upset about pornography lately.
Yeah. This is him at the National Conservatism Conference, which sounds like something else. National conservatism.
Important. But because I believe the attack on men has been the tip of the spear in the left's broader attack on America. And because this attack, the attack on men, is already far advanced. But even as I describe the danger, there is cause for hope. For while the left's assault on manhood has been sharp and prolonged, it has not yet succeeded. And we must make it our business as conservatives to see that it does not succeed.
Isn't this like a blatant ploy to try to rally the men's rights activist group?
I don't know. It's almost a meme now. Just about, I don't know. He's got some personal issues going on. If he's this worried about manhood being attacked,
he's under attack.
He's worried about people's masculinity, and we have to maintain our masculinity. He's probably got some dude in his basement.
He seems a little freaky, doesn't he?
I want to maintain your masculinity, John.
My masculinity is under attack.
Your masculinity. We must preserve your masculinity. In my freezer.
If you listen to him, I listen to some of his stuff. Basically, what he does is he pretends to support good things like Medicare for all, but he doesn't really. He attacks Obamacare, for example. I have an example here where he attacks Obamacare, but he doesn't support anything better. He just supports rolling things back to fully privatized health insurance. So he's one of these guys that in this new sort of right-wing populist vein, he will criticize tech giants, but he doesn't do anything to regulate them or support any legislation that would do anything to break them up or regulate them. He just talks like he's out to get them, basically.
This is Facebook conservatism. It's just, hey, remember that one thing that we were mad about? Yeah, we're mad about that. Hey, remember this other thing we're mad about? Oh, by the way, they're coming for your kid's masculinity too. I don't know.
You think it's silly, but I think this is.
I definitely think it's silly, and I definitely think it is targeted at the lowest common denominator of right-wing intelligence, IQ.
Just wait till we get where we're going with this show.
Okay.
It gets pretty ominous, dude, and scary. Peter Thiel also invested tens of millions of dollars in J.D. Vance's Ohio Senate campaign. J.D. Vance is this grifter who wrote Hillbilly Elegy, which glommed on to the right-wing populism thing in the Rust Belt. I'll play the clip and then I'll discuss it. This is pretty interesting. How slick he is with what he does here.
So one reason is obviously economic or structural. So you think of these areas, they're beset by these terrible economic trends built around industries like coal and steel that make it harder for folks to get ahead. That's certainly one problem. There's also the problem of brain drain, where the really talented people, because they can't find high-skill work at home, end up moving elsewhere. So they don't build a business or nonprofit where they're from. They end up going elsewhere and taking their talents with them.
See, those are both true, but those aren't the important things. The important thing's coming up. The reason the Rust Belt is so poor.
There are failing schools in a lot of these communities, failing to give kids the educational leg up that really makes it possible for kids to have opportunities later in life. These things are all important. I don't mean to discount these structural barriers, but when I look back at my life and at my community, something else was going on. Something else mattered. It's difficult to quantify, but it was no less real. So for starters, there was a very real sense of hopelessness in the community that I grew up in. There was a sense that kids had that their choices didn't matter. No matter what happened, no matter how hard they worked, no matter how hard they tried to get ahead, nothing good would happen. So that's a tough feeling to grow up around. That's a tough mindset to penetrate. And it leads sometimes to very conspiratorial places. So let's just take one political issue that's pretty hot, affirmative action. So depending on your politics, you might think that affirmative action is either a wise or an unwise way to promote diversity in the workplace or the classroom. But if you grow up in an area like this, you see affirmative action as a tool to hold people like you back. That's especially true if you're a member of the white working class. You see it as something that isn't just about good or bad policy. You see it as something that's actively conspiring, where people with political and financial power are working against you. And there are a lot of ways that you see that conspiracy against you, perceived, real, but it's there, and it warps expectations.
So, even though neoliberal policies have ravaged the Rust Belt, and there are no manufacturing left, it's all service industry, so it's really poor there now. All that's true, but the bigger issue are liberal policies like affirmative action warping people's expectations. They think they can't succeed, so therefore they can't. That's the problem. They just need to really believe that they can succeed, Tony.
Well, so is that what he's saying? 'Cause I completely agree with that. Everything he just said there. Now, I don't think that things like...
Do you think he's placing the emphasis on the wrong syllable, so to speak? Pretty slick, man.
He's talking about perceptions, not what's actually happening. So, him talking about growing up in an area in the Rust Belt, there's an incredible sense of hopelessness. Like, I recognize that. I identify with that. I've seen that around me. I've felt that myself. You look around, you don't see the avenue out. And, it kind of gets to this Facebook conservatism or Facebook politics that I was talking about earlier. You're out there... It's people's eyes being drawn to the wrong thing. I mean, obviously there are other reasons that people are in these bad positions. People are in these bad positions, but I have heard that from people. I have heard so many people, specifically with affirmative action, and they feel like, well, yeah, this is keeping me. All these black people are getting hired ahead of me, and these are policies to keep white people down, and you get all this conspiratorial thinking that goes into this. It kind of goes hand in hand with these policies, and it's harmful. I don't know how much good it's doing, but whether correct or not, and I think in most cases it's not correct. People have to realize that instituting these policies does cause a lot of harm. It does cause a lot of conspiratorial thinking, and it does cause a lot of strife, racial strife, I guess, in places like here in Kentucky. I mean, I've worked with these guys that have said this stuff. They didn't have any affirmative action where I worked at, but they certainly believed it happened there, and they certainly believed that they'd been negatively affected by it. So,
I would probably argue that it's not the affirmative action that's the problem. The problem is people like J.D. Vance pumping this shit up. That's what I would argue. But
yeah, no, I don't think affirmative action is the problem. I'm just agreeing with the sentiment that people think that it is.
Sure, yeah, I think that's
correctly often
or used. This is part. J.D. Vance, he's super slick, dude. This is part of what's known as the Dark Enlightenment. I'm not sure if you've heard this one yet, but this is very interesting. J.D. Vance is a visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and he is a founding investor in right-wing YouTube competitor Rumble. He is the Rumble guy, J.D. Vance, and he is heavily funded by Peter Thiel. I'm sure you know this guy. Mr. Eric Weinstein is Peter Thiel linked. He is the managing director of Teal Capital. In 2013, Eric Weinstein announced that he had solved the unity problem of physics, uniting particle physics with gravity. This is what physicists have been working on forever. This is the hard problem, and it's called geometric unity. Experts in physics, however, claimed that they can't evaluate his theory because he hadn't published an actual paper on it. But on April 1st, he had an appearance on JRE where he released a draft paper for geometric unity, his theory. He is famous for coining the term intellectual dark web, so he says, and he hosts the Portal podcast with guests like James O'Keefe and Peter Thiel. Our last contestant, the most interesting one of all probably, is this guy, Curtis Yarvin. He is a proponent of what he calls the Dark Enlightenment. This is a conspiracy theory basically that says the real rulers of the United States are a cabal of liberal universities and social media members called the Brahmin. Society is being eroded by progressive values like egalitarianism. Here is the man himself. He had this very influential blog some years ago. He goes by the name of Mencius Moldbug. But his real name is Curtis Yarvin. Here is a little bit of this charming fellow.
So, obviously, a very complicated problem. So, I like to simplify things. So, I've reduced this very complicated problem to a simple four-letter acronym, which is RAGE. And RAGE stands for Retire All Government Employees. Very, very, very simple. Now, the problem with this is, why have you never heard this before? Why has no one ever suggested, let's just get rid of this thing? To a substantial extent, it's because most people are operating under delusion that they do this every 4 years. They thought in 2008, hey, you recruited this government in 2008. And
people think
it was just the same. The reality is, as anyone who knows Washington knows, that the politicians you elect in these democratic elections are really entirely superfluous to the mechanism in Washington. They change things a little bit. You know, it matters a little bit whether you vote for Democrats or Republicans, but basically, if the whole system were, the whole electoral system, all this, you know, how a bill becomes a law, all this stuff we learned in 11th grade, all disappeared, Washington would go on running exactly as it's running now. So,
this guy, it gets dark, dude. It's crazy how much influence this guy has and had, and still has. One of the most influential right-wing bloggers probably of all time. He's directly linked to Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel listens to this guy religiously. I'm sure other people do too. This is the same vein as the libertarian thing. So his idea is to discard democracy in favor of technocracy, or rich high-tech oligarchs basically running the country. He contends that society needs a, quote, hard reset, or a, quote, rebooting, not a series of gradual political reforms. He wants to directly align property rights with political power, formally in what he calls, quote, formalism. And like I said, he's very influential in right-wing circles. He is read and admired by people like Steve Bannon, Patrick Friedman, and Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel invested $100,000 in Yarvin's startup. And Yarvin himself, this Mencius Moldbug character, claims that he has been, quote, coaching Thiel. I had the displeasure of watching the vast majority of this. It's pretty hard to watch. This is Mencius Moldbug on Michael Malice's show.
Rich.
Does it bother you how much contemporary conservatives are of the belief that the culture and the left has gotten more extreme, as they would say, or more in control of culture?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that it's ever not been in control of culture throughout our lives. And this is the point. The thing is that, conservatives, mainstream conservatives, DC conservatives have a very sort of, if you go back before Buckley, their history is completely made out of cardboard. And so the fact that, what you realize when you read The Red Decade, and Eugene Lyons, for those who don't know, was he had this kind of classic Jewish communist background. He was actually a member of the Communist Party, and he lost his faith. He got himself assigned as the UPI reporter to in Moscow, right? Which is sort of as if somehow not.
This is meandering and not very well cited, but basically what he does in this is he cherry picks like very specific people throughout the early 1900s that were like left-wing communist members or Socialist Party members, and sort of tries to claim that they were the ones running the country back then, like even through McCarthyism somehow. It's very conspiratorial and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And he sort of reminds me of like Spoonie, if you know who that is. He's like a D&D person, like YouTuber, but he's very like LARPer, isn't he? Like,
I was getting ready. He looks like he did a guest appearance on Friends in the 90s.
The fact that how's this guy so well respected? If you listen to him talk,
yeah,
it's insane,
he definitely has a fun noodle PVC sword somewhere in that house.
This guy is at the center. He's at the center of this Dark Enlightenment, dude, with all these rich libertarians trying to fucking overthrow the government. It's frightening, too, when you realize how much power they have.
No, for sure.
Steve Bannon is involved in this shit, dude, and he was one of the orchestrators behind January 6th.
I think we're in the wrong line of business, James. I think you and I could come up with some conspiracy, make something up that makes more sense than what he's doing. Get some money. We need to get paid.
They're blatant about it. They don't even mess around. Yeah. He talks about how he wants to replace democracy. In this particular interview, he speaks positively about apartheid in South Africa. He also speaks positively about the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. Like, these guys they go hard into the paint. They're not messing around, dude. And the fact that there's $6.92 billion worth of clout behind this Dark Enlightenment is what's scary to me.
Now, do you think he buys into what he's saying, or is he just... Because he does not look like a charismatic mouthpiece that's been chosen by the billionaires to go out there and spread this crap. So
he's not the mouthpiece. He's just the blogger behind the dumb ideas.
He's the blogger. He just... read Ayn Rand in his sophomore year and never got past that like most people do.
Here's the man himself, Peter Thiel. This is his speech at the National Conservative Convention. Pay attention to his mannerism, dude. This guy's scary.
A very all-important question. Where do you sort of shift from the wisdom of crowds to the madness of crowds? Where do these things shift to becoming, a mob or a racket, or simply something that's...
He's talking about the government here.
Totalitarian lie. And there's sort of, in the philosophy of science, sort of the, one of the ways I think you can sort of frame it is that science always thinks of itself as fighting a two-front war against extreme skepticism and extreme dogmatism, sort of the way it originated in the 17th and 18th century. So extreme skepticism, if I say, I don't believe the audience exists, can't trust my senses, you can't do science. Extreme dogmatism, the Aristotelian notion that the earth can't possibly move, that's probably also bad for science. And of course, in its 18th century version where the scientists style themselves as deists and rationalists and free thinkers of various types, it was always the fight against dogmatism that was what dominated. And in a very, I think, paradoxical turn, that is still the way they think of themselves, even though if you sort of say where it's gotten unbalanced and erred, it has obviously just become massively on the side of dogmatism, not enough skepticism at all, you see this, of course, in all the genuflections to science with capital S. In this household, we believe in science. That's sort of an evidence that you don't, or just even just the assertion. I always think that when you have to call things science, they aren't, like climate science or political science. We don't use physical science or chemical science because you don't need to push it quite that hard. And
doesn't he seem a little schizophrenic or something? Like something's wrong with him?
Yeah, he's a little
fervent or something.
A little fervent. That's the perfect word.
He acts like he's been reading Mencius Moldbug all day. He's worried the commie government's going to come get him. They're going to tax me.
Yeah, I don't know.
We need to rage. Retire all government employees. This is frightening to me. This is frightening.
If he didn't make billions, would he still be saying this?
Probably not. He probably wouldn't have such a big interest in the societal distribution of wealth. He has a lot of wealth he needs to protect, right, with his ideology. I'm sure he formed his ideology around that. I'm sure every billionaire thinks they deserve to be a billionaire,
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's some credence to the idea that you get to that level of success. And obviously, you're going to have political connections, and you've dealt with starting businesses aplenty and dealing with different regulations, and you probably have a lot more experience than someone like myself in understanding how bloated many of the bureaucracies are and how much nonsensical red tape and how inefficient things work, and even the corruption. He's well aware that, hey, I could get this certain permit if I donated to this guy's political campaign. I don't know. I mean, I think there's something to listen to with these guys. But the break the system, it's really self-serving to point out all the obvious faults in the system, and then have the system that you put back in its place be incredibly self-serving.
If there's one person who has the most power over the government, it's Peter Thiel. He's a freaking billionaire. What is he complaining about the government for? He can do anything he wants. He could write his own legislation, I'm sure, if he wanted to, and just pay to have it enacted. I mean, what is he complaining about? For one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe he honestly knows how the government works better than you or I, or he goes, hey, this is a broken system. I mean, it worked well for me. It worked for me in this particular instance, but it is a broken system, and maybe we need to replace it with something. And as far as
they're
that
not
goes,
talking about
agree
replacing it.
Yeah, well, yeah. So he goes one step, which is get rid of the broken system, and then just kind of ends it there and doesn't replace it with a better system.
They're not complaining about the fact that it's not democratic enough, what we would probably complain about with the government. They're complaining that it's too democratic and controlled by the Soviet Politburo or something.
Yeah, that's my understanding of who's in control of the EPA.
And the whole idea of retire all government employees, like he tries to claim that the government would go on exactly as it was without all the government employees. It's like, well, who's going to do all the stuff? Who's going to do the stuff that needs to be done? Like, what if you retire all the if all the postal employees are retired, who's going to deliver the mail? You know what I mean? Who's going to write the Social Security checks?
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense on its face.
It's crazy conspiracy talk.
He's saying like, well, okay, we get rid of it, but we keep the laws in effect or the basic function in effect. I mean, this is, I don't know.
I think they just want to let Facebook write their own legislation. I think is what they want. They want a technocracy. He spells it out pretty plainly. Moldbug does in his blogs.
Yeah. Well, all I have to say to them is get on Facebook for a couple minutes, or anybody that thinks this is a good idea, just get on Facebook for 10 minutes and see how well thought. See if these are the people you want running your society. This is the national discourse you want to have.
Or you just watch this freaking speech he gives at the National Conservatism Conference here. It's pretty frightening. I don't know. It makes me very uneasy when you consider how much power this guy has. He funded, this is paraphrasing from Mother Jones, he funded a magazine that has published articles dismissing climate change and evolution. In late 2016, he donated $1.25 million to support Donald Trump. He recommended 2 climate change deniers to Trump to hire as his science advisor. And this year, Thiel has committed $10 million to help J.D. Vance, which we discussed already. Yeah, and the question I have is, like, all the money he has, that $7 billion, he can invest how he wants, right? This is a capitalist society, but is this who we want doing that? Shouldn't we have some sort of oversight, some sort of democratic control over where this money gets invested?
I don't know. That's a good one.
Or you think Peter Thiel knows better?
I think that there should be big restrictions on how directly he's able to use that money to affect politics and the different politicians out there. But I don't know. I mean, if he wants to give his money to some LARPer to write something on his blog, I mean, I don't really have much of an issue with that. I mean, I have an issue with what he's saying. I have an issue with his goals, what he's trying to do, but
do you have an issue with him funding this climate science denial stuff? Are you worried about like the climate issue?
Yeah. Oh, I've got I mean, that's kind of the number one issue, really. I mean, if this planet's not here, then nothing else really matters. But it's I can't see a way around this. It's not completely authoritarian. I guess that's what I would kind of fall back on. How do you
around what?
Around
climate?
How do you stop someone like him from funding bullshit scientific papers trying to disprove climate scientists without being authoritarian?
I have a great way. You tax the hell out of him so he's not so freaking rich. Take all his money from him and spend it on shit we need, like healthcare. We have good healthcare. Me and the wife have good healthcare. We still spend hundreds of dollars a month on freaking healthcare. It's ridiculous. And we're lucky. We have insurance.
And this gets back to what I would agree with Peter Thiel on. That what are you going to do? Okay, you tax them. The system's so broken. The money's not going to go where it needs to go.
It's more democratic than just letting Peter Thiel do it. I mean, there's some democratic processes there.
You're going to tax him, and he's going to take half a billion dollars and develop some lobbying firm, and they're going to write a bunch of new loopholes in the tax codes, and develop a bunch of new grants to where all that money is going to go right back to him. And he's going to make it all anew again. I mean, that's.
You know what the solution to that is?
Yeah, kill all the lobbyists. Oh,
socialism. You pass a constitutional amendment. You have to pass a constitutional amendment that gives workers control over the workplace. That way we can't have this kind of wealth accumulate in one freaking bank account. It's ridiculous.
Do something. Certainly get money out of politics. I mean, I think that
would help. That would go a long way.
In my opinion, that's step one. That's the one thing that you have to do to start bringing about any meaningful change. But No, this is something friend Sam from school. We were talking about this just a week or so ago. He's of the opinion that the system is that all these changes that he would be in favor of, that having billionaires be taxed substantially more than they are right now, it's all meaningless because the system's so broken. It's not gonna. There's nothing gonna happen if you do. It's all gonna be smoke and mirrors. If you put their tax rate at 50%, they're gonna write so many new bills and give themselves so many new grants that all the money is just gonna go back to them anyways. It's not gonna go where you're hoping it's gonna go.
I don't know.
Maybe I'm just a complete pessimist when it comes to how the American
I guess it depends on what.
but-
I guess it depends on what part of the system you're talking about. If you're talking about the electoral system, I mean, there are ways we can change it, right? We can pass laws to change the way the electoral system works. We've done it in the past. The Senate used to be appointed. It didn't used to be elected representatives, for example. And we can go further in that democratic direction. We just need to organize people to do it and stop fighting about fucking culture war issues.
Yeah. And
that's the hard part, right?
And we should. But my point is that you have a lot of other fixes that need to be made. I don't think taxing as of right now, I don't think taxing billionaires would do a damn thing to solve any of the problems in this country. I think there's so many other problems you have to fix first to make the system, slightly functional, so that would do any good.
I don't know, man.
So
I think at that point,
billionaires,
the government would have so much money, dude. It would be hard for them to say no to passing like universal health care with that much capital.
Have you listened to Mitch McConnell ever speak?
Well, Mitch McConnell is...
We would tax their money, and then we would make their tax... I don't know. Yeah, I'm too pessimistic on it. I think that money would end up going in all sorts of research programs for Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, where basically we're going to invest in our future, and we're going to do this by giving Jeff Bezos $3 billion to build a catapult out of paper clips. Here you go, Jeff.
Well, then we just tax it. That money would just get taxed back to the government, though. See, they wouldn't be that rich to have that much political power, right? Theoretically.
Oh, I mean, we're starting here today. That's why I'm looking. If the system were set up like that, then hopefully,
if he can't donate money to political campaigns, then he's going to lose a lot of his leverage with these representatives. Mm-hmm. Is the idea? If all campaigns were funded by the government and it was a set amount, like they should do, if it was a democratic country, then there wouldn't be the leverage. The leverage wouldn't be there for like these insurance companies and shit to lobby Congress. I mean, they could still lobby him with, like, maybe they could get a job there after they get out, but it wouldn't be as direct. The way we have it now, our representatives need that money to run their campaigns. Campaigns are expensive to run. They need that money. They're beholden to these guys, man.
In that idea, like, if you take all of their money, then they don't have the money to spend to influence politics, but yeah,
I'm thinking more along the lines of passing a bill, passing like a constitutional amendment to, like I said, contributions are provided by the government and they're a set amount. And you get like $5,000 per candidate or something, That's all you get.
Yeah, you would have
no outside investments.
Set up a U.S.-based BBC, something that's actually paid more attention to than NPR and PBS, and you don't have to give their campaigns anything. You just, hey, this is the state-funded news channel, and each person gets X amount of minutes on here, and we go over our platforms, and that's it.
There's a lot of things we could do legally to make the system more democratic.
Yeah.
How influential are these ideas in wealthy elite circles? Seems like they're pretty well ingrained, given the names involved, including former President Donald Trump as part of this Dark Enlightenment. And what will it look like when the rising tide of socialism in the West comes into direct opposition to property rights, libertarian fascists like this in a violent way? Are we looking at a civil war? This is always the question, in the back of everybody's mind. Nobody knows, but seems like the makings are definitely there. Here's another question. Is it possible for these guys to defend their property against the majority of the people? They had decided to expropriate tax all this guy's wealth, is there a way he can defend all that wealth?
I think we're getting to the point where we're going to start finding out very soon. I mean, the amount of wealth that such a small section of the society has amassed, like, yeah, I mean, and influence, wealth and influence. So obviously, Peter Thiel, he's still on the board of Facebook, I believe, right?
You could make an argument that the wealth isn't even a problem; it's really the influence, right? But
it's
you
the
could make that argument.
wealth brings, yeah. I don't know. We might be seeing what private armies, what kind of propaganda he could spread to get people to join his private army to defend him against the evil communists that are trying to get him to pay for schools in his neighborhood.
See, I think you're right. I think that's the problem. He would be able to hire like a private army, and they would get paid very well compared to everybody else, right?
Yeah, literally. And I mean, and it's not even the pay. I mean, he's on the board of Facebook. People are so easily influenced, can be convinced of the dumbest crap if they read something on Facebook that their fucking aunt shared with them.
I already know, dude.
I mean, it's unreal. He could
do your own research.
With the data that Alexa, bringing it back around, with the data that Alexa has stolen from everybody, they could create an algorithm that could convince people that he's the second coming of Christ, or I don't know, some crazy stuff, and then people would go there and fight for him for free. He wouldn't even have to use his billions to buy a private army.